Welcome to the 2018-2019 Compliance Training. In compliance with federal regulations, this training course and related exam is required for EROs and every employer contractor who interacts with taxpayers about our tax refund products. This training will cover key compliance standards related to tax refund products and services. We believe that these requirements are an integral part of ensuring product soundness as well as minimizing risks for us and for you. We will discuss the following topics: tax refunds and our products, federal laws and regulations, other program rules and requirements, and compliance monitoring. Tax refunds and our products. MetaBank is the financial institution for the tax products we will discuss in this training. Before you discuss our products, you should always present the following information about the IRS refund options first. The IRS provides refunds through direct deposit or mailed check. The refund is normally received in less than 21 days for direct deposit and 21 to 28 days for mailed checks. The government does not charge for this service. The taxpayer will have to pay your tax preparation fees out of pocket. Also, the MetaBank tax-related products and services are optional and not required. It is important the customer is aware these products are optional. Next, present the federal refund transfer and disclose each of the following important points. The refund is normally received in less than 21 days for direct deposit and 21 to 28 days for mailed checks. By using our products, the taxpayer will not receive the refund faster than a direct deposit from the IRS. This is not a loan. There is a cost to the taxpayer. We charge a processing fee when the first refund, either federal or state, is received and processed as a tax refund product. If a taxpayer receives a federal refund and a state refund, we charge an additional processing fee. The taxpayer can choose to pay your fees from the tax refund, or they can pay you out of pocket. If your office provides state refund transfers, provide the following information to taxpayers who will receive a state refund. The state refund transfer can be obtained in conjunction with a federal refund transfer, or it can be a standalone product. By using a state return, the taxpayer will not receive their refund faster than a direct deposit from the state. This is not a loan. There is a cost to the taxpayer. We charge a processing fee when the first refund, either federal or state, is received and processed as a tax refund product. If a taxpayer receives a federal refund and a state refund, we charge an additional processing fee. For taxpayers choosing both a federal return and a state return, your fees will be deducted from the first refund received by us, which may be the state refund. If your office is eligible to participate in the Refund Advance Loan Program and you have opted in, your tax software will inform you of the taxpayers who meet the preliminary criteria for a Refund Advance Loan. If the taxpayer then wishes to apply for a refund advance loan, you must allow them to submit an application. You must not promise final approval based on this preliminary criteria. Final eligibility for the refund advance loan is determined by us after we receive the application and complete our underwriting process. A taxpayer can apply for a refund advance loan without requesting a refund transfer. Important: for any taxpayer who applies for or receives a refund advance loan, you cannot charge the taxpayer a fee for the refund advance loan, or increase any fee, such as tax preparation, electronic filing, or service bureau fee, above the amounts you would have otherwise charged without a refund advance loan to the taxpayer. Any violation of this rule may result in immediate and permanent suspension from our programs. Key information that you must present to the taxpayers before they can apply for a refund advance loan product is: our product is a loan and is not the taxpayer's tax refund. It is available in different amounts and is repaid only from the tax refund. If the taxpayer's refunds are not sufficient, the taxpayer is not obligated to make any additional payments. Please reference the program-specific user guide, which contains additional product details including product offerings, loan tier amounts, individual fees, and costs. The following options are available for refund transfers: checks printed at your location, direct deposit to the taxpayer's existing bank or card account, and subject to your participation, prepaid cards. For refund advance loans, the following options are available: checks printed at your location and subject to your participation, prepaid cards. Federal laws and regulations. There are several federal laws and regulations you must abide by when offering our products. We will discuss each of these in more detail. Bank Secrecy Act and USA Patriot Act. We'll explain the purpose of the Bank Secrecy Act and the USA Patriot Act. We'll determine why financial institutions must have a customer identification plan and identify your role in carrying out the requirements of CIP. The Bank Secrecy Act and the USA Patriot Act were adopted by Congress in combat money laundering, which is the process whereby money from criminal activities is disguised as coming from legitimate sources, and the funding of terrorism. Every financial institution is required to develop a Customer Identification Plan, or CIP, in order to form a reasonable belief that it knows the true identity of each customer. A taxpayer who uses our services is considered a customer. You must download a copy of MetaBank's BSA, AML, and OFAC Compliance Program Guidelines for Electronic Return Originators, or EROs. You can access the document in the Customer Center under Forms and Materials. Before you take the compliance test at the end of this training, you will be required to certify that you have read this document and agree to follow the rules it contains. Because we do not have direct contact with taxpayers, we must rely on you to carry out the requirements of the CIP. In order to comply, you will need to examine an unexpired government-issued ID for all taxpayers who choose a tax refund product. This includes spouses on a joint return. Record and retain the data specified in the BSA, AML, and OFAC Compliance Program Guidelines for Electronic Return Originators that you will download. Next, Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, or GLBA. We will explain the purpose of the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act and determine what personally identifiable information is, as well as responsibilities to protect it. For taxpayers, this law addresses the collection, disclosure, and protection of non-public personal information, or NPI, that you obtain from taxpayers and their dependents. NPI is any personally identifiable financial information you obtain during tax preparation or any related services, unless that information is otherwise publicly available. Examples of NPI are a taxpayer's income amounts and Social Security numbers. GLBA requires you to protect NPI from loss, damage, unauthorized access or use, and improper alterations. The following are some of the actions you should take. Use an alarm system in your office if possible. Lock paper records in secure locations that are only available to authorized personnel. Use strong passwords, firewalls, and antivirus software on your computers. Use reliable backup and recovery systems that are properly controlled. Encrypt electronic data where available. Dispose of unused customer information in a secure manner, such as shredding paper. Deliver the MetaBank privacy notice at the end of each product's application form. GLBA also requires us to explain our information sharing practices to taxpayers. To do this, we deliver the MetaBank privacy notice at the end of each product's application. Fair and Accurate Credit Transaction Act, or FACT Act. We will explain the purpose of the Fair and Accurate Credit Transaction Act and also list red flag situations that may be warning signs of identity theft and prepare to act. FACT Act includes provisions designed to prevent and mitigate identity theft. Among these is the Red Flags Rule, which requires us to implement a program to detect and respond to the warning signs or red flags of identity theft. Because you have direct contact with the taxpayers, you play a critical role in our Red Flag program. Be on the lookout for situations such as these. Documents provided by taxpayers' identification appear to be altered or forged. The photograph or physical description on the identification document is not consistent with the appearance of the person presenting the document. Other information on the identification document is inconsistent with information provided by the person presenting the document. Income or other documents appear altered or forged. For example, does a W-2 have a different format than others that you have seen from the same employer? An unusual pattern is noticed across multiple taxpayers. An individual taxpayer may not stand out, but something that is unexpectedly repeated on several tax returns may indicate a fraud ring. When asked to provide identification documents or explain inconsistencies, the person has a response that just doesn't fit. Is it evasive or contradictory to facts that you know? Remember to trust your sense. If something doesn't look right, investigate further. What should you do when you detect a red flag? In some instances, you may be able to resolve or correct the suspicious item before processing the tax return. Remember that the goal is to separate honest mistakes or misunderstandings from fraud and identity theft. If there is no simple resolution, don't process the return or refund product application. Contact our Financial Intelligence Unit at 800-967-4934. When you report fraud or unusual activity to us, it must be kept confidential. The taxpayer should not be notified that you have reported this situation. Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, or OCC, will explain the presentation of the product information to taxpayers, what you must tell them, and how you must do it. Also, review rules regarding fees charged to taxpayers. This regulation requires that you observe several business practices when discussing tax refund products with the taxpayers. Before a taxpayer submits any program application, you must present each taxpayer with all options for tax refunds and a full explanation of all tax refund products. You must advise the taxpayer that they are not required to apply for any tax refund product, that they will not receive their refund any faster by selecting our product. Present all costs and fees that will be deducted from their refund. Give the taxpayer time to review all the program documentation, including the application forms and disclosure statements. Allow the taxpayer to ask questions and then provide answers that are honest and complete. Inform the taxpayer that the lender for the refund advance loan product is MetaBank. The OCC also specifies practices that are prohibited from using. Don't make any statements that contradict written disclosures or other program materials. Don't try to persuade taxpayers to ignore written disclosures or other program materials. And don't pressure a taxpayer for use of any of our services or select a specific tax refund product. You cannot charge higher fees to taxpayers because they receive any of the following: a refunded transfer, a refund advance loan, or earned income credits. Fees charged should be the same as taxpayers who receive a similar level of service but don't have any of these items. This includes all fees: tax preparation, electronic filing, and service bureau fees. Federal Trade Commission Act, or FTC, will explain all financial products along with their terms and conditions. Section 5 of the FTC Act prohibits unfair or deceptive acts and practices in the conduct of business, including your tax practice. The prohibited acts include deliberate actions that may deceive or defraud taxpayers, as well as omission of material information that a taxpayer needs to make an informed decision. A specific requirement is that claims in advertisements must be truthful, can't be deceptive or unfair, and must be evidence-based. In addition to these general FTC standards, the OCC has other advertising rules specific to our products. As a result, we're required to review any marketing materials mentioning or referring to our tax refund product. If you develop any such materials, you must submit them to us prior to the use of the materials. We will review them and provide a written response. Equal Credit Opportunity Act. In this session, we'll explain the purpose of the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, or ECOA, and identify the different types of discrimination and prepare to avoid them. This law applies to offices that offer the refund advance loans. ECOA prohibits the consideration of the following factors when making a decision to lend or extend credit: race, color, religion, national origin, sex, marital status, age, receipt of public assistance income, and good faith exercise of rights under Consumer Credit Protection Act. You are strictly prohibited from asking questions about these factors or from having any information in your tax files about these factors, except for items used in tax preparation, meeting CIP requirements, or determining eligibility to execute applicable agreements. If a taxpayer meets the basic eligibility requirements programmed into the tax software and the software presents the opportunity to apply for a loan, you must allow the taxpayer to apply if they wish. Truth in Lending Act will identify your responsibilities under the Truth in Lending Act, or TILA. This law applies to offices that offer our refund advance loans. The Truth in Lending Act is intended to promote the informed use of consumer credit by requiring standardized disclosures about its terms and cost. For the loan products, the disclosures required by this law are included in the application form that you provide to the taxpayer. To comply with this law, you are required to inform clients about all charges, fees, interest rates, and other details associated with the offer. Provide copies of all disclosures to the customer. These are included in the loan application and agreement document. The IRS consent forms, or consent to use, will define the relevant IRS rules and regulations and ensure compliance with these requirements in your tax practices. The IRS rules strictly regulate what you are allowed to do with taxpayer data. In order to use our services, the IRS has mandated that you must obtain 2 different consents from each taxpayer. Consent to use. Without a taxpayer's written consent, the IRS does not allow you to use tax data for anything other than preparing and filing taxes. In order to evaluate whether a taxpayer qualifies for our programs, you have to obtain their consent to use their tax data for that purpose. The taxpayer's signature must be obtained before you can offer any tax refund product to a taxpayer. Since this form is required before you can begin the application process, some tax softwares will not automatically print it with our other forms. If so, you should manually obtain the consent to use from the tax software or our website. Consent to disclose. If a taxpayer decides to apply for one of our products, this written consent gives you the authority to disclose their tax data to us. This form must be signed by the taxpayer before you submit any forms or information to us. The IRS has very strict rules for the format and content of these consent forms. Through our website and/or your tax software, you have access to forms designed to meet those requirements. If you choose not to use the form, you must ensure that your forms meet all of the IRS standards. You must use forms that are designed for MetaBank's refund transfers. If you use other versions, they will not meet our program requirements. In your tax practice, you must comply with all IRS rules and regulations, including those for e-file. IRS rules prohibit using pay stubs to e-file returns prior to the receipt of W-2 forms, unless you are using IRS Form 4852 as a substitute for the W-2. IRS Publication 1345, Handbook for Authorized IRS e-file Providers of Individual Income Tax Returns, provides details on the e-file requirements that you must observe. For your convenience, you can access the publication at the web address identified here. In the State and Local Law section, we will determine any existing requirements that directly affect the offering of tax refund products in your state, and identify other requirements for participation in our tax refund programs. Many states and localities have adopted rules that regulate taxpayers and the offering of tax refund products. Some states currently require that taxpayers register with the state and/or meet certain eligibility requirements. Some states and localities require that you post certain items on the wall in your office, hand out separate written disclosures, or even make specific verbal disclosures to your taxpayer. New York City and Chicago are among the cities with their own disclosure requirements. Even if your state currently doesn't have these rules, be aware that consumer advocates are attempting to extend these requirements to additional states. Instructions for each state can be found in the Customer Center under Forms and Materials. To aid you in the compliance with the law, we have created forms and disclosure posters tailored to various states. However, adherence to state and local law is your responsibility. If you fail to do so, your office may be suspended from our programs. For check disbursements, we'll identify proper handling of checks and check disbursements. Keep your check stock in a secure location. This includes printed checks that taxpayers haven't picked up. When handing out a check to a taxpayer, check their ID and have them sign the check disbursement receipt, which is the top 1/3 of the check printing page. Retain the receipt for your records. You can't cash or otherwise negotiate, such as depositing into the taxpayer's bank account, tax refund checks that are payable to another person. Prepaid cards. We'll identify proper handling of prepaid cards and prepaid card disbursement. Ensure that all card stock is properly stored in a secured location. If a taxpayer expresses interest in a disbursement by prepaid card, you must give the taxpayer a copy of the card's terms and disclosures supplied by MetaBank. Review this documentation with the taxpayers. Make the taxpayers aware of the additional cost associated with this disbursement option. Encourage the taxpayer to provide a valid email address so they can receive important servicing messages like your card is ready for activation or your card is ready for PIN setup, in addition to other important service messages. For document retention, we'll describe the proper document retention requirements. Remember that all program documents must be retained by you for a minimum of 5 years. This includes product applications, agreements, consent forms, and all required disclosures. This requirement applies to all tax refund products, regardless of whether or not they are approved or funded. You must make any program document available to us upon request. If you are unable to do so, it can result in your suspension or inactivation from our programs, as well as other legal consequences. Other important reminders. If you receive a customer complaint related to our products, you must report it to the appropriate MetaBank division by calling 800-967-4934. Make sure that you verify the data on all program forms, including fields that are auto-populated by your tax software. You must ensure that every taxpayer understands and agrees to everything they sign. For joint returns, both spouses must sign our program forms requiring taxpayer signatures. You are responsible to ensure proper signatures are obtained in your presence. If a taxpayer pays you out of pocket, your fees can't be deducted from their tax refund. If no refund is received, the taxpayer does not owe our processing fee for a refund transfer. In those cases, you will be responsible for collecting your fees directly from the taxpayer. Compliance monitoring. Recognize methods by which you will be monitored for compliance with MetaBank's process and procedures. Government standards require us to monitor electronic refund originators who participate in our programs. We use various methods to ensure compliance with the standards outlined in this training. Standard reviews of your records conducted by correspondence, on-site review of your records, required disclosure postings, and security procedures. Mystery shopping, where undercover personnel are sent to your office for actual preparation of a tax return and application for our products. Ongoing monitoring of your tax return and program activity by our Financial Intelligence Unit. In a review, you may be required to verify the following. Taxpayer documents required by the program have been accurately completed, properly signed, and retained in your files. You have complied with the Customer Identification Program requirements. You have followed all disclosure requirements, including any mandatory postings. Your office has adequate physical security. Taxpayer records, check stock, and card inventory are stored in secure locations that are only available to authorized personnel. Your computers have firewalls and antivirus software, as well as meet other security requirements. Mystery shopping is conducted in selected tax offices. The mystery shopper is seen as a regular client who will request a loan product. The appointment will be scored based on the criteria designed to test for compliance with GLBA, BSA, USA Patriot Act, ECOA, and TILA, and other consumer financial laws and regulations outlined in this training. In addition to our efforts, remember the other groups are also monitoring your performance. The IRS, state and local revenue departments, banking regulators, consumer protection officials, and consumer advocates. We, along with the IRS and other government officials, take compliance with the program standards very seriously. As a result, if you fail to follow these guidelines, we may be forced to suspend or close your account with us. You may be required to forfeit your fees or other payments that you would have received otherwise, and you may be responsible for damages or other penalties. Please download and read the BSA AML and OFAC Compliance Program Guidelines for Electronic Refund Originators from the Customer Center. Please conclude your training by completing the compliance test. This concludes the compliance training. Thank you for your participation.